So we are getting closer and closer to the 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific NFL trade deadline, and San Francisco had not made a move, and you're thinking, okay, it looks as though the Niners are going to stand pat. But they beat the buzzer, and the 49ers have made a move. They are trading a 2026 7th-round pick to the Houston Texans in exchange for defensive tackle Khalil Davis. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Thank you so much for hanging out here with me, and I know that you're going to find today's show very informative. Dianna Russini breaking the news right at the NFL trade deadline at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, 1 o'clock there on the West Coast, that the 49ers trading for Khalil Davis. You see the compensation there, a 7th-round pick going to Houston. Some familiarity here between both organizations, as DeMeco Ryans, the former Niners defensive coordinator, now the head coach there. And this is actually the second defensive tackle that the Niners have traded for with the Houston Texans over the last several months. They let go of Eric Armstead. He moved on. They traded for Malik Collins, who's been a pretty solid player, and now the Niners are bringing in Khalil Davis. Obviously, a lot to break down and get to here on the show, but this is why you subscribe, because when the Niners make a move, I'm always here for the faithful. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. We have been talking a lot about how San Francisco could look for defensive help, particularly at edge rusher and at defensive tackle. Whether or not they were going to bring in a star, I had always been pretty adamant that San Francisco wasn't really going to make a blockbuster type of acquisition. We talked about some of those players, but the feeling that I got in talking to people and the feeling that I had in just canvassing this football team, engaging the temperature with where they are at, going into the bye, now coming out of the bye, they were looking for depth pieces. And that's exactly what Khalil Davis is. So to give up a 7th-round pick for a player who's going to be a part of that defensive line rotation, you make that type of move. More on Davis. He was a 2020 6th-round pick out of Nebraska. He is currently 28 years old. Pretty good size at 6'2", 315. He's also a quick an explosive athlete with a very fast get-off. And I think Chris Kocurek and this Niners staff, they really like that about the player here. Doesn't have a ton of experience in playing actual games at the NFL level. He's drafted by Tampa Bay. He plays 2 games in 2020. He's with the Colts in 2021 for 1 game. In 2022, he wasn't on an active roster with the Bucs or the Rams. In 2023, he actually played at the USFL level. So facing some adversity with his NFL career hanging in the balance, and then he signs with the Houston Texans in 2023 and was with Houston in 2024. Those numbers here this year, somewhat of a limited workload, but not bad production in 9 games. Certainly a rotation piece for Houston, like he will serve with San Francisco. 1 sack, 4 TFLs, 2 quarterback hits, and 9 tackles. And San Francisco here, this is a move that they needed to make. Ever since losing Javon Hargrave for the season with that torn triceps, they were thin along the interior of their defensive line. The Pro Football Focus numbers for Davis: overall grade of 53.5, pass rush grade of 56.6, a run defense grade of 51.5. Those numbers, not great, not awful, average, solid. 8 pressures, 6 hurries, 4 stops. He was on the field for 69 run defense snaps and 102 pass rush snaps. So we talked a lot about a player like Davon Godchaux of the New England Patriots, who's number 1 among defensive tackles in run defense snaps. Davis has been on the field more on passing situations as compared to running situations, but he can do a little bit of both. What this comes down to, I think the Niners and their player development program, their coaching staff, they look at a player who has some untapped potential. They've done such a great job of bringing in defensive linemen specifically and maximizing those players. In the pre-draft process, at that size, he ran a 4.75 40-yard dash. That's the explosiveness and the get off at the snap that I talk about. And oftentimes here on the show, we have referenced these relative athletic scores. This is how MathBomb is able to gauge how good of an athlete is in the pre-draft process on a scale of 0 to 10. And by the way, over the years, their graphics have gotten a lot better from when they did this in the infancy, especially back in 2020. But what you see here is a lot of green as far as the explosiveness and the speed. A 9.57 relative athletic score on a scale of 0 to 10. We talked about the 40-yard dash, 4.75, but the 10-yard split, especially for defensive linemen, especially for defensive tackle, short area quickness, it's a 1.66. That is also in the green, and the 20-yard split is also in the green. So that's what MathBomb deems to be elite athletically. And I think that the Niners thought about that, and I imagine John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, Chris Kosaric, they're going to talk about that once they do their press conference and have media availability. What I always try to do on this show, too, is to read the tea leaves and inform you with the moves that the Niners have made, which then leads us to what they could do in the future. And as we always approach the NFL trade deadline, I've talked on previous shows how San Francisco, under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, have been very active. And some people wonder, Chase, why are you talking about all these trade rumors? It's because San Francisco makes a lot of moves. And we've talked about how they brought in the likes of Emmanuel Sanders, right? And Christian McCaffrey, Chase Young in recent years. But also look at the sample size and look at what their path has been as far as making in-season NFL trade deadline trades for defensive linemen. Jordan Willis in 2020, Charles Omenihu in 2021, Randy Gregory last year, Chase Young last year, and now Khalil Davis here in 2024. This is a Niners team that really prioritizes defensive line and defensive line spending, but also defensive line depth. Yes, I do wish that they would invest in the offensive line like they do in the defensive line. And how about this? Some chat stats for you. The Niners have made a deadline move every year under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, except for 2018. So again, the proof is in the pudding here, and their track record tells you that oftentimes they are aggressive in trying to improve their football team as we approach the NFL trade deadline, and that's why we talk about trade buzz here on this show. So what do you think? Will Davis make an impact? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Share your thoughts with me and what you think about this trade down in the comment section right now. Plenty more to get to, so be sure to stay tuned. But first, today's sponsor, our friends at Game Time. What time is it? Game Time. If you want the best seats at the lowest price guaranteed, an app that treats you well, where you get in the door, saving money, with great views from your seats, because you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Then download the Game Time app. They also have a bunch of great features. You toggle the all-in pricing tool. It gives you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. They have flash deals, zone deals, but also, thanks to Game Time Picks, curation makes it easier to find good seats and save money to concerts, comedy shows, theater events, and sporting events. If you want to go to a Niners game this year, home, on the road, plenty of tickets available. The Golden State Warriors back in action in San Francisco. Specifically for the Niners coming up on Sunday, they exit the bye to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, download the app, create an account, use the code CHATSPORTS, CHATSPORTS, for $20 off. Terms apply. First purchase only. So I gave you my thoughts on the Niners trade. As for my trade deadline thoughts, this does impact San Francisco because I think the Niners on the margins got a little bit better. They brought in a depth piece. But you think about teams that they are competing with in the NFC, but in the NFL in general, to win a Super Bowl. And a lot of contenders, they made moves to get better. The Commanders trading for Marshawn Lattimore. The Detroit Lions making a trade for a pass rusher, which we'll get to here in a second. The Kansas City Chiefs, DeAndre Hopkins, Josh Uche, and the Lions, by the way, Zadarius Smith. Like, these are impactful players that help these playoff and Super Bowl contenders. The Ravens, I love their trade of Deontay Johnson to make their receiver core a little bit better. The Cardinals getting active in the pass rusher market. The Minnesota Vikings. Christian Darrisaw went down with an injury, so what do? They trade for Cam Robinson, a left tackle, to take over for him, and he played damn good football on Sunday Night Football to help that team when they know that they are in this playoff Super Bowl window. As for the moves that we saw today, Browns are receiving a 2025 fifth-round pick and a 2026 sixth-round pick for edge rusher Zadarius Smith. Everywhere he's gone, he's been a productive player. Baltimore, Green Bay, Minnesota, Cleveland. Aiden Hutchinson goes down. And before that, Marcus Davenport was lost for the year. Lions understood we have the number one overall offense. We can get a little bit better on defense, especially rushing the passer. Let's bring in a player who's a veteran, who's played in a lot of big games, who can still play in Zadarius Smith. We give up a couple of late-round picks, and we get Smith and a seventh-rounder. Cincinnati, Chicago also making a trade today. The Bengals bringing in running back depth with Khalil Herbert. He can run it. He can serve as a pass catcher, not a great pass protector, but the Bengals give up a seventh-round pick to add to their running back room. Shouldn't have traded away Joe Mixon. He's been fantastic with the Houston Texans, but they bring in a deadline acquisition there in Herbert. I don't know what the heck the Dallas Cowboys are doing. You think about this wide receiver trade market, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Jahan Dotson before the year. All of those players, I thought that those respective teams got better value back for better players as compared to Jonathan Mingo, and the Cowboys gave up a fourth-round pick. Jerry Jones is senile right now. I just don't understand what that organization is doing. They're also trading for a wide receiver when their quarterback, Dak Prescott, goes on IR, and they're 3-5, suffering 3 ugly losses consecutively. Washington, New Orleans, the Commanders, very busy. Marshawn Lattimore, he's probably the best corner in the history of the Saints organization, and New Orleans is in a spot where they're trying to shed salary, rebuilding a little bit. The Commanders, they need to get a little bit better going into the deadline at corner. So what do? They trade for Marshawn Lattimore, who, when healthy, one of the better corners in the game. They're in a division where they have to face Malik Neighbors and C.D. Lamb, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Now Lattimore bulks up that secondary. They also get a fifth-round pick back in 2025 as Adam Peters was making some moves. And then the Saints get back a third for Lattimore. Not bad value. You get a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick in totality there if you are New Orleans to help streamline that rebuilding process. Pittsburgh and the Jets. The Steelers receiving wide receiver Mike Williams. They've been in the market for a wide receiver for a long time, going all the way back to the offseason when they were very interested in Brandon Ayuk. And the Jets get a fifth-round pick for a player who wasn't even in that wide receiver rotation any longer. And Pittsburgh, another team, playoff-level squad, trying to get better. They get Preston Smith, an edge rusher for the Packers, who has also been a productive player, wasn't playing all that much for Green Bay, and they give up a seventh-round pick for a player who they're going to be able to maximize. They have a loaded defense, and I think Smith is going to be able to go in there, and he's going to be able to give them some juice. Ravens-Rams making a deal. The Ravens get Tre'Davious White, a corner, and a 2027 seventh-round pick. I personally think that White is on the backside of his career, slightly trending toward being cooked, but the Ravens also do a good job of developing, grooming corners. They're not going to have to do that with White because he's a two-time Pro Bowler, but you put him in that system, and it leads to him being able to have success, and they give up a seventh-round pick for a player who's also going to be, at the very least, able to add some depth to that roster. So be sure to give me a follow on X and Instagram. I always put out a bunch of Niners content on my social media pages, so catch me over there. Be sure to subscribe right here, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.